Before I really get into this commentary, I have to acknowledge Professor Black Truth because one of his recent MOTs that he did was basically talking about the racism that black kids are dealing with in schools is what prompted me to make this video, because I believe that he touched a little bit on Ron DeSnowflake, as I like to call him. Well, I got two names for him, DeSnowflake and DeSatan, and both of them describe him perfectly down to the T. And that's what made me want to talk about this. And I saw, I think, a post on Instagram that was related to this as well. Now, if y'all remember last year, Ron DeSantis actually proposed this Stop Woke Act thing. He proposed it, I believe, back in December of last year. It was just a proposal, but now it has actually been signed. And look at this picture right quick. Don't even look at the snowflake, but look at the people around him, especially right here, 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 and here. These 1, 2, 3, 4 individuals don't look comfortable at all standing up there. They just look like they're just there for a photo op, which a lot of times that's why they are there. But anyway, he has this new thing called the Stop Woke Act. Now, I pretty much have an idea of where they're headed with this, and it's pretty obvious. They really can't even hide it. Well, he can't hide it anymore. But Ron DeSantis, I kept telling people, you think 45 and 46 are bad? Let this man run for president and win. He will be worse than both of them combined. I keep telling people that. But for some reason, some people down in Florida seem to like him. But it is what it is. I don't have to deal with him. Hopefully not right now anyway. And hopefully not ever. Because, you know, this guy, like Ron, he's feeling himself. You know, because he took on Disney. And, you know, he kind of brought Disney, the park itself, to his knees with the most recent thing that he did, you know, taking away their self-governing. Or trying to anyway, or at least putting a dent in it. I'm not exactly sure what the outcome of that has been. But, you know, that's actually going to hurt at least the city of Orlando for sure, since that is where Disney World sits in. Because, you know, they had like special tax breaks in that city because Disney World is on a property that is self-governing. So they get special tax privileges. Very good ones from what I've heard. But because of what he didn't like, he decided to say, okay, fine. Since you didn't want to do what I told you to do, I'm going to do this. So now it's not only hurting the park, but it's also hurting the residents who live in the surrounding areas. Like, this guy's literally trying his best to be a dictator. And so far it is working. So, and of course, you know how he feels about CRT and everything like that. So now this is his latest move. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and read this article coming from Time. And it was posted April 22nd, 2022. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed legislation on Friday that aims to regulate how schools and business address race and gender, which is probably not at all, the state's latest effort to restrict education about these topics. The law, which has become known as the Stop Woke Act, prohibits workplace training or school instruction that teaches that individuals are inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously, that people are privileged or oppressed based on race, gender, or national origin, or that a person bears personal responsibility for or must feel guilt, anguish, or other forms of psychological distress over actions committed in the past by members of the same race, gender, or national origin. When you really break that down, all this is a anti-PC discriminatory bill, in the sense of that you cannot speak ill of anyone who would identify as Ron DeSantis would. It's basically the protect white people's feelings bill. That's why I called him Ron DeSnowflake. But these are the same people that say that we're snowflakes and this and stuff like that. And this is the biggest one down in Florida, probably one of the biggest ones in America. Now, let me go back and read that. It says it prohibits workplace training on school instruction that teaches individuals are inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. That right there is against mainly, of course, white people. The second part says that people are privileged or oppressed based on race. The first part is privileged. That's against, white people. And it says oppressed based on race. That's black people. So that was a dig at black people when he said that, but that was an upliftment to white people, or you know what I mean. That people are privileged based based on race. Race, gender, or national origin, or that a person bears personal responsibility for or must feel guilt, anguish, or other forms of psychological distress over actions committed in the past, so on and so forth. That's again protecting white people, PC. That's all this bill is. As a matter of fact, when you think about it, every bill that Ron DeSantis has signed has been for the benefit of white people and only white people. It's so glaring. It's so glaringly obvious. He can't help himself. The Republican-led legislation passed the Florida House in February by a vote of 74-41 and the Florida Senate in March by a vote of 24-15 along partisan lines. No one should be instructed to feel as if they are not equal or shamed because of their race, DeSantis said in a statement on Friday. In Florida, we will not let the far-left woke agenda take over our schools and workplaces. There is no place for indoctrination or discrimination in Florida. But here's the thing, Ron. There is this thing called the internet. And there's another thing called viral. When you combine those two together, your little bill is not going to really beat that. Because we're talking about one state versus the world. Who do you think is going to win? And besides, a lot of these kids are learning stuff outside of the classroom anyway. Because honestly, even when I was in school, they didn't teach the stuff. Like, I learned more about my history outside of the classroom than in. And that goes for public and college-based education. And that was before, elementary and middle and high school. That was before social media really took off. College, it was still in its infancy stages because I graduated in 2011. And at that time, all we had was Facebook. MySpace was pretty much fizzled out. Twitter was on the rise. And what else? And Instagram was on the rise as well. I remember one time Instagram was just exclusive to people who had Blackberries. Now that's taking it way back. That shows you how far long ago that was. And then people who had iPhones, then it became exclusive to that. And now everybody, of course, has Instagram. But now, you have those platforms that I just mentioned. And then, of course, you have TikTok, which is just booming. And, of course, YouTube is still here as well. So when you combine all of that and how people get the news, Ron's little bill is not going to be as effective, in my opinion, as he thinks it's going to be. Unless this dude, and I hope I'm not jinxing it, let me knock on wood, somehow gets a hold of the even a sliver of the internet, which I'm sure he wishes he could, because God knows if he did, he would take full advantage of it and implement his policies and throw it into some kind of streamline in the internet. But we know that's probably going to be, that's way out of his control. But you never say never, because stranger things have happened. DeSantis, a Republican, proposed the legislation in December under the name Stop the Wrongs to Our Kids and Employees, which is an acronym for WOKE Act, saying he aimed to take on both corporate wokeness and critical race theory. We won't allow Florida tax dollars to be spent teaching kids how to hate our country or to hate each other, he said at the time, while calling critical race theory state-sanctioned racism. And the thing about critical race theory is it's not taught in public schools. I'm like, what does it take to get through these blockheads that is not something taught in public schools? It's something that's taught on a collegiate level, preferably in law school. But they're so convinced that it's going to get to schools. I don't know one school in America on a public level, K through 12, that teaches this. But they want to implement, teaching the history of the academy. They're trying to make that a requirement. Some schools, they are a requirement, and it's not even an elective. It's a required course. Critical race theory is a graduate level academic framework that explores how institutions perpetuate racism. School districts across the country have emphasized that it is not being taught at the K through 12 level, but the topic has become a catch-all target of conservative critics who argue that lessons or trainings addressing systemic racism will divide children and make white students uncomfortable. And that part right there, that line that I just read, make white students uncomfortable, is why Ron DeSantis is implementing all these bills. He knows who lines his pockets. He's doing this to make them feel comfortable. So basically, like going back to, the videos that I've talked about where you have black students facing racism in classrooms, from the other students, the other classmates, leave it up to Ron DeSantis the black students are wrong for retaliating and the white students are in the right. Which many, if you look at the stories that I did, that's basically how they're framing it. Because look at the punishments. They don't add up. They're not balanced. Florida's new law has been criticized by civil rights groups and free speech advocates who warn that it will have a chilling effect on educators. This dangerous law is part of a nationwide trend to whitewash history and chill free speech in classrooms and workplaces. Amy Turkle, interim executive director of the ACLU of Florida, said in a statement, "It will infringe on teachers' and employees' First Amendment rights and chill their ability to use concepts like systemic racism and gender discrimination to teach about and discuss important American history." The law allows teachers to address how the individual freedoms of persons have been infringed by slavery, racial oppression, racial segregation, and racial discrimination, and how laws enforce racial discrimination. But it also says the lessons may include how recognition of individual freedoms overturn these unjust laws and may not be used to indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view. The law also says officials who review instructional material may not recommend any materials that reflect unfairly upon persons because of their race, color, creed, national origin, ancestry, gender, religion, or other characteristics. And it prohibits lessons or trainings in schools and workplaces that teach that individuals should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment to achieve diversity, equity, or inclusion, an apparent reference to affirmative action policies, which traditionally benefit Black and Latino students or employees in an effort to offset centuries of racial discrimination. First off, affirmative action was supposed to be for Black people, but who got it? White women. See, the constant lying. And that goes back to this bill. This is also so they could perpetuate lies. I mean, they already do well without it, but now he's going to really rev it up. He's really going to rev it up. That's why I said this is why he cannot be president. And some people, might disagree, but some people, the people that probably disagree are the ones who agree with him. But this guy is he is a menace. And I put on Twitter the other day that Ron DeSantis is a spoiled brat. I can tell that when he was a kid, he probably threw all kinds of temper tantrums. He was probably hell on wheels as a child. I wouldn't be surprised. Because look at how he acts right now. A grown child. And of course, they had the shoehorn Latinos in there somewhere, like black and brown means a damn thing. I just did a video the other day about a man named Angel Miguel Moreno who brutally murdered this woman and dumped her into a box. And then the first thing he says when he calls into the dispatch is that a black man did it. But they love to lump us in there somehow. Listen, let me continue. They may also not advance the idea that concepts like merit or racial color blindness were created by members of a particular race, color, sex, or national origin to oppress members of another race, color, sex, or national origin. See, again, going against what's already historically been proven, and to protect their image, as if the internet is not there. That's what makes this so silly. You can easily look all this stuff up for yourself. They act like that the end all be all is going to be taught in these classrooms, and it's not. It's not. Hell, I wouldn't even say that the classroom is a launch pad, depending on who the teacher is. Florida State Rep Brian Avila, who sponsored the bill, called out Disney, the largest private employer in the state, during debate about the legislation. He criticized the company's diversity training, saying it would run afoul of the new law. Some critics of the law are especially concerned that it affects both K-12 schools and public colleges and universities, where there are stronger protections for academic freedom. Because it prohibits the promotion of these ideas by public university faculty, it is almost certainly unconstitutional, says Jeremy Young, senior manager of free expression and education at PEN America, an organization that advocates for free expression. He notes that some schools and colleges around the country have already canceled events related to civil rights or courses covering race, fearing backlash or sanction if they violate new education-related laws. In January, for example, Florida's Osceola County District canceled a workshop for teachers about the civil rights movement in light of the current conversations across our state and in our community about critical race theory. Listen, like I said, the Stop Woke Act is basically to stop talking about the Niggas Act. in their oppression, because where it's making us upset. If they can go out there into the streets and say they're so oppressed, they would with no pushback. What do you think that whole January 6th thing was about? That was them, quote unquote, protesting their so-called oppression. You know, whatever oppression is running through that maze they call a brain. You know, the whole Stop the Steal. You know, they felt that 45 was the rightful winner of the election. And how did they react? By storming one of the biggest federal buildings, not only in the nation, but probably the world. The history professor who was scheduled to lead the seminar said his presentation was not about critical race theory. That was months before Stop Woke became law. Young expects similar instances will only become more common now. I think that this bill is going to intimidate every teacher in the state of Florida at every level. Florida's new law is the latest example of controversial legislation coming out of the state that takes aim at discussions of identity. In March, the state enacted a law dubbed the Don't Say Gay Bill by critics that bans public schools from teaching about sexual orientation or gender identity in kindergarten through the 3rd grade and prohibits teachers teaching about those topics in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students. The broadly worded law could also allow parents to sue school districts if they think that their children were given inappropriate instruction that violated. Academy rights activists have warned that the legislation will make schools a less welcoming environment for students and could negatively affect their mental health. Over the last year, DeSantis has also spoken repeatedly about keeping critical race theory out of the classroom. In March, he signed a law allowing parents to review all curriculum materials and school library books and object to those that they didn't want their child using. We've never seen anything like this in terms of concerted attacks on public education in a single state, Young says, and it's really devastating to see these bills become law. The Florida Department of Education recently rejected 54 of 132 submitted math textbooks from being used next year, citing reasons that include references to critical race theory and the unsolicited addition of social emotional learning in mathematics. Some of the problematic elements in textbooks identified by the department included graphs of data on racial prejudice by age and political leaning, and a page that said students should build proficiency with social awareness as they practice with empathizing with classmates during lessons on identifying numbers. Social emotional learning strategies are commonly used by schools to promote mental health and to help students cope with stress, which can hinder their ability to focus and learn in school. But like critical race theory, the subject has become a target of conservative critics who argue it focuses on discussions about identity and racial and gender equity. Young says the rejection of the math textbooks is an early sign of how the state could approach enforcement of the Stop Woke law moving forward. The Florida Department of Education at a state level is going to enforce this law to the absolute maximum that they can. He says we don't always see that in every state. Oh yes, because Florida is a very special state. It is a very, very special state, and Florida has been a special state since the night that Trayvon Martin got murdered by George Zimmerman over 10 years ago. That's when Florida, in my opinion, started to become a very special state. Now, this is only coming from somebody who is from the outside looking in, because I don't live in Florida. I've only been to Florida one time, but that was back in 2000. So you're talking 22 years ago. A lot has changed since then. I'm 100% certain of that. But yeah, this is just a bill to curb the feelings of those who look like Ron DeSnowflake. That's all it is. That's what I said about a lot of the bills that he signed. Like when you read about what the bill is about, even if you don't read the entire bill, but you get a grasp of what it is, that's what it is. To stop talking about the oppression of other groups, to stop making white people feel bad and, make them feel good about themselves and everything like that. Okay. But like I said, you have the internet. Some parents might start homeschooling, but guess what? They might throw a loophole in there too to keep them from doing an influx of parents doing homeschooling, and then they're going to find something to make their child come back to the classroom so they can indoctrinate them with more lies. It's funny that Ron DeSantis says that they don't want them to indoctrinate these kids about quote unquote critical race theory and other things that's wrapped up in this act, but you want to indoctrinate them with a bunch of lies, because guess what? If you're going to hide the truth from them, how do you hide it? By covering it with a mountain of lies. That's how you do it. And that's what they're going to do. And that's what they have been doing and will continue to do. They really think that they're doing something good. And by them, I'm talking about him in specific because he's the one that pretty much drafted and signed this bill. This guy, when he says anti-woke, he basically is saying anti-black. Like, read between the lines, read through the code speak. Lee Atwater, as racist as he was, he taught us this. This is all code speak that he's doing, and it's not even really good code speak. It's like covert and overt, but more overt than covert. Because like I said, Ron DeSantis, he's feeling himself. As governor, he now has it, when he's comfortable now. This guy is extremely racist. And he knows he is. He may not say it, but he is. Now, I can't really speak what, is going on with other groups that may be affected by this. I can only talk about what's going on with us. Like I said, I don't know, like, to my Florida subscribers, y'all who, follow me, let me know what's going on down there in Florida. Because I'm sure y'all have more insight about this because y'all are in the state. So I can only go off of what is being provided in the text. But y'all live there. Y'all are experiencing this. So I would love to really hear from my Florida subscribers and followers what in the world is going on down there in Florida under this guy's rulership. But like I said, we better hope this dude does not become president, because I'm telling you, whatever he's doing at a state level, you can best believe he's going to try to make it a federal thing, because he probably wishes he could, but because he's governor, he can only regulate his state. He cannot go outside of the borders of Florida. But God knows if he could, he most definitely would. And that's probably why he wants to be president, because this guy would implement everything he's doing on a state level on a nationwide level. Hell, he might extend it to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, because even though those aren't states, those are U.S. territories. They're pretty much owned by the U.S. And that's my take on it.